Well, you could almost feel it as you walk through the prison yard. It was a very difficult time for the faithful steward, or the governing body. They had always been true to what the Bible teaches about what represents true Christianity. They were always very blunt, very bold. They took the gloves off, you might say. And then it got to the point where the United States got into the war, World War I. In spite of Woodrow Wilson's attitude and his feeling about neutrality, well, the governing body under the baton of Brother Rutherford showed the tremendous inconsistency of clergymen who professed Christianity, acting as recruiting agents for the nations preparing for wholesale slaughter. It was unconscionable, and he wasn't afraid to say so. His position was they should be neutral, because this is going to be a terrible experience. Well, the clergy, several influential members of the clergy, felt this was an ideal opportunity to attack. And so what they did is they used the Espionage Act, or they tried to use the Espionage Act to get the brothers in prison, because it was inconvenient to be talking about neutrality when the war was raging in Europe. It didn't mix. And they saw it, and they strategically influenced the government to act on it. And it was acted on. It was a highly prejudiced trial. The clergy asserted that this was treasonous. It was espionage. And what's ironic about that is, if there are any people on the entire planet Earth who aren't into espionage and sabotage and all of those nefarious things, it's us. That's not us. But they sold it. And it was a highly prejudiced trial. There's a record of 130 procedural errors. And the long and the short of it was that our brothers were brought here to this fair city, ironically, on July 4th, Independence Day, 1918, in belly chains and in handcuffs. Van Amberg and Macmillan, DeCecca, Rutherford, of course, all eight were brought up those granite steps into the penitentiary. And to put it in a few words, they were brought here to disappear and die. There's no better way to put it. This was to be the tomb of the faithful steward, thanks to Christendom's clergy. And they were here for 9 months, and you might say, well, 9 months isn't very long. Well, it's not very long if you're not in prison. It's particularly uncomfortable if you are in a 10-foot by 7-foot or something like that cell. In fact, Brother Rutherford, even though there were many glorious successes, he ended up with pneumonia. And he was hurting after that. His lungs were damaged. The good news is they conducted meetings. I think there were up to 90 in attendance at those meetings. Brother DeCecca met with all the Italian convicts, and they loved him. They got along real well. And many of the correctional officers, they called them the screws back then. Now they call them officers. Were deeply impressed. How could you not be? You have brothers of the anointed, called to heavenly life, let loose in a prison. I mean, it was a holiday for the prisoners. Many of them never forgot it. And today you walk in there, and even though couple of those buildings or several of those buildings aren't there. I've been in those buildings and conducted the memorial in those buildings. But there's just that feeling that you're on special ground. And it's particularly ironic that the place that was intended to be their tomb is a hatchery for wonderful brothers who've come out and who've done a 180. I mean, they come in as bank robbers. I mean, who's been here? Al Capone has been here. Carlo Ponzi has been here. Bernie Madoff. The French Connection. I forget his name. It's not important. He's dead. John Gotti's been here. And so has Brother Rutherford Van Amber. The irony is palpable. I thought what was interesting, too, was Gavrilo Princip, the crazy Serbian student who, I say crazy, I don't know what other word to use. He wasn't thinking clearly, who killed Archduke Ferdinand and Isabella. He got 20 years for starting World War I. Now, do the math here. You have some mature brothers who write literature about God, and they got 4 terms of 20 years each. So they get 80 years, and the guy who starts World War I gets 20. Now, if that isn't the hand of the devil, and that's why I say this was to be their tomb, but Jehovah wouldn't have it. So, it was from the hot, steamy Georgia summer in 1918 to the spring of 1919, 9 months. And they were exonerated. The prosecution was withdrawn. The charges were viewed as having no basis, unjustifiably and clearly excessive, according to the president, and they were dropped, and the charges were expunged from their records. And they came out, I've got to say, they came out with an attitude. Babylon the Great was not their favorite lady. And interestingly, all during this time, the Watchtower kept being printed and circulated. The spiritual food, even though it came out in tablespoons, was still available, thanks to God.